What happens when a former royal walks onto a talk show, thinking she can control the narrative, only to meet hosts who refuse to play along? The tension in Studio 3B was thick enough to cut with a knife as cameras rolled for what was supposed to be a friendly morning chat. Instead, viewers witnessed one of the most explosive confrontations in daytime television history. Before we dive into this incredible story, make sure you hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below telling us what you think about celebrity entitlement. Trust me, you're going to want to share your thoughts after hearing what went down. The morning started like any other at the studio. Ripa adjusted her earpiece while reviewing her notes, occasionally glancing at her co-host, Consuelos, who was doing his usual pre-show warm-up with the audience. The energy was light, casual, exactly what their viewers expected from their favorite morning duo. "All right, everyone, we're back in 60 seconds, called out the floor director, his voice cutting through the studio chatter. "Our guest is in makeup. Should be ready for segment 2. Kelly turned to Mark with a raised eyebrow. "Did you read the pre-in notes? Because honestly, some of these talking points seem a bit well scripted." Mark nodded, shuffling through his cards. "Yeah, I noticed that too. Usually, guests are more flexible about the direction of conversation. This feels different." The floor director held up his hand, counting down silently. 5, 4, 3, 2. And they were live. "Welcome back to the show." Kelly's voice was warm and inviting as she faced the camera. "We're joined now by someone who needs no introduction, but we're going to give her one anyway." Her smile was perfectly practiced as she continued. "Please welcome our guest." The applause was enthusiastic as Meghan walked onto the set, her posture rigid with confidence. She settled into the guest chair, smoothing her dress with deliberate precision. "Thank you so much for having me," Meghan said, her voice carrying that familiar rehearsed quality that both hosts immediately picked up on. "Of course," Mark replied, leaning forward slightly. "We're excited to hear about your latest projects. I understand you have some new ventures you'd like to discuss." Meghan's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. "Well, actually, I was hoping we could focus on the more important issues. The work I'm doing around social justice, the systemic problems I've been addressing." Kelly exchanged a quick glance with Mark. This wasn't unusual. Guests often wanted to steer conversations toward their passion projects, but something in Meghan's tone suggested this wouldn't be a typical interview. "Absolutely," Kelly responded smoothly. "Though our viewers also love hearing about the lighter side of things. Maybe we could start with how you're adjusting to life here and then move into your advocacy work." "I think it's more important to use this platform responsibly," Meghan interjected, her voice taking on a slightly sharper edge. "Too often, morning shows focus on frivolous topics when there are real issues that need attention." Mark's eyebrows rose slightly. In 15 years of hosting, he'd rarely had a guest essentially criticize their show format within the first minutes of an interview. "Well, we definitely cover serious topics," he said carefully. "But we also believe in giving our audience a mix of content. It's a morning show after all." "Exactly my point," Meghan continued, seemingly oblivious to the slight tension she was creating. "Morning shows have this incredible reach, this ability to influence public opinion. And instead of using it to educate people about inequality, about the struggles that marginalized communities face every day, you spend time talking about celebrity relationships and fashion choices." Kelly's professional smile remained intact, but Mark could see the slight tightening around her eyes that he learned to recognize over their years of working together. "I think our viewers appreciate variety," Kelly said diplomatically. "We cover breaking news. We have serious political discussions. We interview authors and activists. But we also think there's value in moments of joy and entertainment." "Joy and entertainment," Meghan repeated, her tone suggesting she found these concepts somehow distasteful. "While people are suffering, while children are going hungry, while families are being torn apart by poverty and discrimination." The studio had gone noticeably quieter. Even the crew members, who usually moved around during commercial breaks and lighter segments, had stopped to watch this unexpected confrontation unfold. Mark leaned back in his chair, his media training kicking in as he tried to redirect the conversation. "Those are certainly important issues, and we'd love to hear about the specific work you're doing to address them. Can you tell us about your foundation's latest initiatives?" "That's exactly what I'm trying to do," Meghan said, her voice rising slightly. "But you keep trying to steer this toward fluff. I came here to talk about real change, real impact, not to discuss my morning routine or my favorite restaurants." "Nobody asked about your morning routine," Kelly said, her own voice carrying just a hint of edge. "Now, we asked about your adjustment to a new chapter in your life, which seemed like a natural starting point for our conversation." "Natural? According to who?" Meghan shot back. "According to the same media machine that reduces women to their personal lives instead of their professional accomplishments. The same system that focuses on what we wear instead of what we think." Mark and Kelly had hosted thousands of interviews between them. They dealt with difficult guests, awkward moments, technical difficulties, and every conceivable challenge that live television could throw at them. But neither had ever experienced a guest who seemed determined to pick a fight with them on air. "I think there might be some misunderstanding here," Mark said, his voice remaining steady despite the growing tension. "We invited you here because we respect your work and wanted to give you a platform to discuss the things that matter to you. But this is a conversation, not a lecture." "A conversation requires listening," Meghan replied coolly, "and respect for the guest's priorities." Kelly sat down her coffee cup with a soft clink that somehow seemed amplified in the increasingly uncomfortable studio atmosphere. "We are listening and we do respect our guests, but we also respect our audience who tune in expecting a certain kind of show." "Maybe your audience deserves better than what they expect," Meghan said, her words hanging in the air like a challenge. The silence that followed lasted only seconds, but in television time it felt like an eternity. Mark could see their producer in the control booth frantically gesturing, probably trying to figure out whether to cut to commercial or let this train wreck continue to unfold live. "I'm sorry," Kelly said, her voice carrying a dangerous calm that Mark recognized. "Did you just suggest that our audience, the people who have supported this show for years, don't deserve what they're getting?" "I'm suggesting that they deserve content that challenges them, that educates them, that inspires them to action," Meghan responded, apparently not recognizing the warning signs in Kelly's tone. "And you don't think we provide that?" Mark asked, his own patience beginning to wear thin. "I think you provide entertainment, masquerading as information," Meghan said bluntly. "I think you give people an excuse to feel informed without actually engaging with the difficult realities of the world." The studio had become so quiet that the hum of the air conditioning seemed loud. Even the camera operators had stopped their usual subtle movements, transfixed by the confrontation unfolding before them. Kelly looked directly at Meghan, her professional mask finally beginning to slip. "So, let me understand this correctly. You came onto our show, accepted our invitation, used our platform, and now you're telling us and our viewers that what we do is essentially worthless." "I wouldn't say worthless," Meghan replied, her tone suggesting she absolutely would say exactly that. "I'd say misguided, shallow, a missed opportunity to actually make a difference in people's lives." Mark felt his jaw tighten. In all his years in television, from his acting days to his current hosting role, he'd never encountered such blatant disrespect from a guest. "You know what? I think we need to take a step back here." "Why?" Meghan challenged. "Because I'm being honest. Because I'm not playing along with the celebrity interview game where everyone pretends everything is wonderful. Because you're being incredibly rude to people who invited you into their home," Kelly said, her voice dropping to that dangerously quiet level that anyone who knew her well would recognize as a final warning. Our viewers don't tune in to watch someone attack the hosts. Maybe they should, Meghan shot back. Maybe they should see what happens when someone refuses to participate in the dumbing down of America. The control room was in chaos. The producer was frantically trying to decide whether to cut to commercial, while the director was signaling to keep rolling, sensing that this was either going to be a disaster or the most talked-about interview of the year. The dumbing down of America, Mark repeated slowly. Is that what you think we're doing here? I think you're part of a system that keeps people distracted from real issues, Meghan said, leaning forward in her chair. You give them just enough surface-level information to feel engaged, but not enough depth to actually understand or act on anything meaningful. Kelly's laugh was sharp and humorless. This is rich coming from someone whose claim to fame is marrying into a family that literally exists for ceremonial purposes. The studio went dead silent. Even the camera operator stopped breathing. Everyone knew that Kelly had just crossed a line, but Meghan's behavior had pushed her there. Meghan's face flushed red. "Excuse me? You heard me," Kelly continued, her professional composure completely abandoned now. You want to lecture us about substance versus fluff? You want to talk about missed opportunities and shallow content? Let's talk about someone who had every privilege in the world handed to them and then spent years complaining about how hard their life was. You don't know anything about my life, Meghan said, her voice rising. You don't know what I've been through, what I've had to overcome. What you've had to overcome, Mark interjected, his own patience finally snapping. Lady, you've been handed opportunities that most people can only dream of. And instead of being grateful, you're sitting in our studio telling us that we're not good enough for you. I never said that, Meghan protested, though her earlier comments had implied exactly that. You didn't have to, Kelly said coldly. It's been dripping from every word you've spoken since you sat down. You came here with an agenda, not to have a conversation, but to prove some point about how enlightened you are compared to the rest of us. Meghan stood up abruptly, her chair rolling backward. I don't have to sit here and listen to this. Actually, you do, Mark said, his voice carrying a new authority. You accepted this interview. You're on our show using our platform, and you're going to finish this conversation like a professional. Professional? Meghan laughed bitterly. This from people who just attacked me personally on live television. We responded to your attacks, Kelly corrected. You've done nothing but insult our show, our audience, and our work since you walked out here. What did you expect would happen? I expected to be treated with respect, Meghan said, her voice shaking with anger. Respect is earned, Mark replied. And you've shown absolutely none to us or to the people watching this show. Meghan looked around the studio as if seeing it for the first time. The crew members were staring at her with a mixture of shock and disgust. The audience members who had been excited to see her were now shifting uncomfortably in their seats. This is exactly what I'm talking about, she said, gesturing wildly. This is the problem with media today. The moment someone tries to have a real conversation about important issues, they get attacked. Important issues. Kelly's voice was incredulous. You haven't mentioned a single specific issue, program, or initiative. You've spent the entire interview talking about how terrible we are. Because you won't let me talk about what matters, Meghan insisted. We literally asked you about your foundation work, Mark reminded her. You're the one who turned it into an attack on morning television. I was trying to make a larger point about media responsibility, Meghan said, though even she seemed to realize how weak that sounded. Kelly asked, was that your strategy for making a point about media responsibility? The floor director was making increasingly frantic gestures from the sidelines, trying to figure out if they should cut to commercial. But both hosts ignored him. This confrontation had gone too far to stop now. You're twisting my words, Meghan said, though the cameras had captured every word she'd spoken. We don't need to twist anything, Mark replied. You called our show shallow. You said we were dumbing down America. You suggested our audience deserve better than what we give them. Those are your words, not ours. I was trying to elevate the conversation, Meghan protested. By tearing down everyone else in the room? Kelly asked. That's your idea of elevation? Meghan opened her mouth to respond, then closed it again. For the first time since the interview began, she seemed to realize that she might have misjudged the situation. Look, she said, her tone slightly less combative. Maybe we got off on the wrong foot here. Maybe, Mark's eyebrows shot up. You spent the first 10 minutes of this interview essentially calling us corporate shills who don't care about real issues. I didn't mean it personally, Meghan said, though her earlier comments had certainly felt personal to everyone in the studio. How else were we supposed to take it? Kelly asked. You came onto our show and immediately started criticizing everything about it. You questioned our integrity, our audience's intelligence, and our professional choices. I was trying to start a dialogue about the role of media in society, Meghan said, her voice smaller now. No, Mark said firmly. You were trying to lecture us. There's a difference between dialogue and monologue, and you've been giving us the latter since you sat down. The silence stretched between them, heavy with tension and unspoken anger. Meghan looked around the studio again, perhaps finally realizing that she had alienated everyone present. I think, she said slowly, that this interview isn't going the way any of us hoped it would. That's the understatement of the year, Kelly replied dryly. You know what, Kelly said, standing up from her chair. I think you're absolutely right. This interview isn't going the way any of us hoped, and I know exactly why. Meghan remained standing, her arms crossed defensively across her chest. Oh, please enlighten me. Because you didn't come here for an interview, Kelly continued, her voice gaining strength with each word. You came here to make some kind of statement about how superior you are to everyone else in entertainment media. That's not true, Meghan protested, but her tone lacked conviction. Mark stood up as well, creating an even more confrontational dynamic. Then what would you call it? You've spent the entire segment talking down to us, criticizing our show format, insulting our audience, and lecturing us about media responsibility while showing absolutely no responsibility yourself. I was trying to have a meaningful conversation, Meghan insisted, though even she seemed to realize how hollow that sounded after everything that had transpired. A meaningful conversation involves two parties actually listening to each other, Kelly shot back. What you've been doing is delivering a prepared speech that you clearly planned to give regardless of what we asked you. The audience was completely silent now, transfixed by the spectacle unfolding before them. Many had their phones out, undoubtedly recording what would soon become viral clips across social media. I don't think you understand the position I'm in, Meghan said, her voice taking on a pleading quality. The expectations that are placed on me, the responsibility I feel to use my platform for good. Your platform? Mark's voice was incredulous. This is our platform, our show, our audience, our studio. You're a guest here, and you've treated this entire experience like you're doing us some kind of favor. I am doing you a favor, Meghan said, the words slipping out before she could stop them. Do you have any idea how many interview requests I turned down? How selective I have to be about the shows I agree to appear on? The studio fell into another stunned silence. Even Meghan seemed to realize that she had just said exactly the wrong thing at exactly the wrong moment. Kelly's laugh was cold and sharp. There it is. The real reason you're here, not to discuss important issues, not to have a meaningful conversation, but to grace us with your presence. That's not what I meant, Meghan said quickly. But the damage was done. That's exactly what you meant, Mark said, his voice carrying a finality that made everyone in the studio lean forward. You think you're better than this show? Better than us? Better than our audience? And you know what? If that's how you feel, then you don't belong here. Are you serious right now? Meghan asked, her voice rising again. You're going to kick me off your show because I tried to have a substantive conversation? We're going to ask you to leave because you've been disrespectful, condescending, and frankly insulting since the moment you sat down, Kelly said firmly. This isn't about having a substantive conversation. This is about basic human decency, which you've shown none of. This is unbelievable, Meghan said, shaking her head. This is exactly the kind of behavior that I was talking about. The moment someone challenges the status quo, the moment someone tries to push for something better, they get silenced. Nobody silenced you, Mark pointed out. We gave you a platform and you used it to attack us. That's not being silenced. That's facing consequences for your actions. My actions? Meghan's voice was shrill now. What actions? Trying to elevate the discourse? Trying to focus on issues that actually matter? Your actions, Kelly said slowly as if speaking to a child, include insulting our show, dismissing our audience, questioning our integrity, and suggesting that we're part of some conspiracy to keep America dumbed down. Those actions! The floor director had given up trying to signal the hosts and was now just watching the confrontation unfold like everyone else in the studio. This had gone so far beyond a normal television interview that all the usual protocols seemed irrelevant.